speaker is going to be Daniela Oliveira, who is a very new assistant professor at Bowdoin College. And also, you'll see both in the participants here and in our speakers and later in the panel, we have a mix of people from very different kinds of institutions. So Daniela is a good example of what you can do in a smaller liberal arts setting.
So just as Rebecca said, while Michael represented someone with tons of experience, I'm a beginner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, how did I get here? In the end of my first year at Bowdoin College, I applied for the career. And this is a picture of around January 2012, and saw my program director giving me my award letter. And yes, I was beaming because I knew about the possibilities that this could open for my research, my students, my institution. Okay, but to get here, we need a research idea, and a great one that you can convince your panel and that it's worth to spend taxpayers' money on your research. We tend to think that research are something that pops, ideas in general, is something that pops out of thin air, the effect of gods and muses in that eureka moment. And this guy, James Webb Young, in the 40s, he said, an idea is nothing more nor less than a new combination of old elements. So who is this guy? He was an advertising executive. He was the first chairman of the American Advertising Council. He was inducted in the American Advertising Hall of Fame and won many awards, including the Advertising Man of the Year. So in the 40s, he was invited to give a talk. Hey, how do you get your ideas? And he started to think, how do I get my ideas? And then he wrote a manuscript, a very informal manuscript for this talk, when he mentions that our brain, regardless of our area, advertising or computer security, goes through a series of phases. And some of them we can influence, according to James. So these are the phases, and he does a very interesting comparison with this and the process that our body goes through when we process food. So the first phase is to gather raw material that's specific to our research, for example, papers in computer security, in social behavior, in economics, and also general. And he emphasized the importance of general, things that you are genuinely interested. Could be a biography, could be your interest in the culture of American Indians, for example. And this represents getting food. Then he talks about a second phase where you work hard over these materials in your mind. You try to establish relationships, analogies. You really try hard to come up with an idea, but you have to understand that the idea will not come onto the stage, but you have to work hard anyway. You cannot skip stages, according to him. And he compares the second phase as the masticating process, like you're masticating food. The third stage is like the let go stage, where you let your brain work in the subconscious. Like you do something, and he encourages you to do something that stimulates your emotions. And he makes an analogy with the gastric juice to actually digest food. And then he says that following this step, the third one, the unexpected birth of an idea for sure will come. And you have to be patient. And he said that for him, it really come unexpected, usually in the early hours of the morning when he was like half awake. And he also added this fifth step that I think was so interesting. It's not enough just to have an idea, but you have to submit this for criticism, to adapt it to the real world or to suggestions by other people. So how my research research idea started. At that time, I hadn't had the opportunity to read about James Webb Young, but when I reflect back, I think that unconsciously I went through over these stages. So on my dissertation, part of my dissertation, I did a piece where I tried to protect the kernel against rootkits, kernel level malware. And at that work, the operating system communicated with the VM in an ad hoc manner. Great, time passed, I continued to read research papers, I started at Bowdoin, and I became genuinely interested in the American mob at that time. I read everything about it. I was fascinated about the strategies that FBI took to bring down the mob and how one strategy was built on top of the other. Like no single strategy alone would be able to bring down these people. For example, the electronic bugs that they placed in key mob hangouts were crucial to bring the cases, but they would not be able to gather, to know where to place these bugs if they hadn't information from low-key informants or from video surveillance. So one strategy built on top of the other, and ideas like neighborhood watch. So I think this all went through my brain somehow, and I thought, hey, what if layers of abstractions collaborated somehow to improve security? Maybe we should rethink the traditional virtual machine usage model. So the traditional usage model was advocated by Peter Chain and Brian Noble in 2001, and I believe many of you are familiar with. What they said is that let's place the security solutions inside a virtual machine layer that has complete control of the system resource, and let the guest OS run unaware of virtualization. The guest OS is a compromisable entity. It should play no role on helping secure a system. And the majority of security solutions follow this model. This model has a cost, the semantic gap. As you can see, there is significant difference between the abstractions at the operating system level and at the VM level. And the security solutions, they need to understand what's going on at the operating system to be able to protect it, to be able to monitor it. So how does the traditional model solve or address the semantic gap? Through a technique called introspection. So with introspection, the goal, of course, is to extract meaningful information from the operating system. And what they do is to do a low-level physical memory analysis of the memory of the OS, and with knowledge of what's the layout of the OS, what are the algorithms being used, what are the data structures, try to reconstruct these objects. For example, try to reconstruct the list of processes running at the OS. And their assumption is the following. Even if the guest OS is compromised by an attacker, our approach still will report correct results because we are running at a lower level. Great. The problem is that some researchers in 2010 addressed the fact that, hey, this assumption does not hold because an attacker can change, can tamper with the OS layout, data structures, algorithms, so as 3 fields of the operating system are provided. One is external, is bogus, and for an introspection tool to see. The second one, internal, bogus, for the operating system to see. And the real one, known only to the attacker. So, in the end, introspection-based tools do rely on the guest OS to report correct results. So why not leverage the guest OS then? Why not make introspection easier, more semantically rich? And so that's what I propose in my career, an architecture where we have a virtualization-aware operating system that actively and explicitly collaborates with a virtual machine layer underneath, sharing boundaries of data structures, sharing information, requesting service, so that the operating system itself would be better protected. Yes, we assume that there is a possibility that the guest OS may be compromised. We protect the collaboration calls between guest OS and VM. And another thing that I just learned today after hearing the program manager is that I'm sort of raising a little bit the cost for the attackers because now they need to try to compromise the guest OS and the collaboration calls. So that's the idea. Both approaches are somewhat vulnerable, but this approach is semantically richer and makes introspection easier. Yeah, so no need to reverse engineer from lower level data structures. And it allows for stronger fine-grained security solution and is no less secure than the traditional one. Okay, so I'm very excited about this project. I'm working hard on that. But what about the future? Does it stop there? A lot of things happen in our professional research lives that concurrently with our current projects. And we have to pay attention to it and try to leverage opportunities. So what's going on, as an example, what's going on in my life as a beginner? Alan Tucker, an emeritus professor at Bowdoin, invited me in November to write a book chapter for the new edition of his book, the Computer Science Handbook. And he told me, hey Daniela, if you want to invite a co-author, that's fine. So I invited Jed Crandall as a co-author. Jed and I used to collaborate a lot as grad students in UC Davis. We are friends, and I also see him as like a mentor, role model to me. He started his as a tenure track 3 years ahead of me, so I see him as like a role model. And then we started researching about vulnerabilities for the book chapter, independently, at the beginning independently. And then I came across a 1995 paper from Matt Bishop that discussed that vulnerability studies are imperfect, that we cannot classify vulnerabilities like buffer overflows, talk-to, any vulnerability in one particular category. Depending on the perspective, operating system, application, compiler, the vulnerability would be classified differently. For example, buffer overflow, from the application point of view, is a string of bytes. If you look at the operating system, the problem is that we are storing control information close to data, and this can allow an attacker to break out of the data context. From the architectural layer point of view, the problem is, information that will go to the EIP register is stored on the stack. So buffer overflows can be categorized in different perspectives. And then I thought, maybe vulnerability studies are ambiguous because the vulnerabilities, they cross layers of abstractions. Then I wrote a draft section and showed to Jed an example with my buffer overflow idea. But at the same time, Jed was doing his research and he tied vulnerabilities to his interests in information flow. And he thought, I think that vulnerabilities are an information flow problem. If you see a system as composed of several states, the vulnerabilities happen because information flows, and as information flows, it's interpreted differently at each state, and some of these states are vulnerable. He also wrote his draft and explained his idea using talk tools as an example, time to check, time to use vulnerabilities. And he explained to me how in talk tools, the security decision to open a file, an unprivileged file, flows into the decision to open a more privileged file. And then we start brainstorming and we thought, hey, maybe it's both. Vulnerabilities happen because they are fractures in interpretation as information flows across boundaries. Let's write an SPW paper together. So we did it. This was March. And so far, our paper got accepted, and the warm reception motivated us for follow-up work in progress with our students. And we just learned that NSPW selected our paper for the XSEC and SPW experience. And who knows, maybe we're going to end up writing a grant together on this topic. So, some final thoughts. I believe that networking is crucial to foster collaborations. Old contacts can allow you to get new contacts. People that you meet at conference and workshop may end up being collaborators. And also, this exchange of experience is really positive, like you feel like you're not the only one. You can share your frustrations, your experience, like, oh, how do you balance your time? How do you recruit your students? What do you do in the situation? An advice that I received by Carl Levitt from UC Davis: whenever you have a chance to present and discuss your research, do it, like the open to criticism. Use your time wisely. Always ask yourself, what's the best use of my time now? This book was advised at Ellen Zigura in the CRA Career Mentoring Workshop. She advised us to read this book, and I thought, oh, I'd better do that. And this, I think, makes a lot of sense. Have a hobby or time to open yourself to emotions, the gastric juice. And also continue to go to other workshops like this. The NSF Career Grant proposal writing was really great, and also the CRA Career Mentoring Workshop. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.